Second story of the day. This is a good one. The first one was kind of weird. This one was a good one. And it shows that I don't know what I'm talking about, which makes me feel even better that you people are watching right now. Daniel Penny acquitted in the chokehold death of homeless man on New York subway. You got to love the BBC. They might as well have said Daniel Penny acquitted in the murder, death, kill of innocent homeless black man on New York subway, right? What's the matter? What's the matter, BBC? Y'all couldn't fit that inside the actual headline? You just didn't want it to be that bad. None of these things. And I didn't want to use the Fox News one. This is Madeline Halpert of the BBC, thebbbc.com. But before we get into it, I was super happy because we're seeing, and I put out a short about this earlier, we're seeing, and I know if Trump was not elected, if it was Biden or Kamala who was elected, this could have easily gone the other way. I get it, but it didn't. If was a fifth, right, you can fill in the blank. But you're starting to see case law and precedent on the rules of self-defense being established. You had the Rittenhouse case, and now you have this one. You can't count Derek Chauvin because that was an LEO case. He was performing as a law enforcement officer. That was not a civilian. Rittenhouse was a civilian. Penny was a civilian, which is why they are in different ways to this. So the 26-year-old man has been acquitted of homicide, which is incorrect because it wasn't going to be homicide because they didn't kill him. Jordan Neely died at the hospital. He didn't die there. After the paramedics showed up and they were like, this dude's really kind of nasty. I don't want to do CPR on him. That's in the transcript. That's not Rick Barrett being a racist. Don't come at me and be like, oh, you're such a racist dude. That's not me, man. You have to understand that the paramedics showed up and they were like, just get him on a cart and let's get out of here. We're not going to do any of this other stuff because he is not really well set up. So jurors deliberated for 5 days before declaring, a case that has sparked weeks of protest. There's like 5 people outside the courthouse protesting, right? This is not going to be the same level of protest that you found after somebody like Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin or George Floyd. One of the biggest reasons why it's December. Riding's a little harder to do in the cold. It is. People don't want to be riding out in the cold. Maybe they could set fire to a Wendy's and stay warm on it, but usually that's not the case. And it reignited debates over race, mental illness, and public safety. These are all things that the BBC has decided to inject into this article because none of that is there. What you had was Jordan Neely go onto the subway, publicly threaten people to the point that Daniel Penny decided that something had to be done. And if you look at the photos, I know they try to crop it out, so it's just Penny putting Neely in the defensive hold. But there were other people holding him down too. And they were of all races and creeds that were doing it. Of course, the leftist media is going to try and tell you that it was just Daniel Penny was sitting on the subway listening to his iPod, probably listening to an audio book of American Psycho, because that's just how he rolls. Then he saw the guy walk by and was like, you know what? I don't like that Michael Jackson impersonator. I'm going to get him. Even though that's not the case. But that's how it's being framed. Jordan Neely had been arrested multiple times for multiple assaults and multiple crimes on multiple people. But in a justice system like New York, which continues under people like Alvin Bragg to release specific groups out without bail, without charging them. Yes, eventually these things happen. You could actually blame the death of Jordan Neely on Alvin Bragg. If Alvin Bragg had actually charged him, upheld the law, which is supposed to be neutral across everybody, then Jordan Neely wouldn't have been in that position, and he probably would be alive today. But let's not do that. That's a little too, that's a little too higher level thinking. The verdict comes after prosecutors agreed to drop more serious charge of second-degree manslaughter on Friday, as jurors could not reach an agreement. And that was crazy. I didn't have Rick Cass wasn't up at that point, but they tried this legal maneuver of, well, if you guys can't decide on the first one, don't talk about it. But you can still consider the second one, which no jury has ever done. This year, 2024, has been historic for so many reasons, especially the lawfare that has been established against Trump, against Penny, that the law can be wielded by those in power, which is why the left is so, afraid, quote unquote, of Trump coming back to power, because they're afraid that he's going to wield the justice system as they had wielded it against him. Whether he will or not, I don't know. The move allowed the jurors to move on. The move allowed the move. You guys work for the BBC. That's what you come up with. To consider the second lesser charge of criminal negligent homicide. The verdict announced Monday was met with loud applause in the Manhattan court. Mr. Penny, who served 4 years in the Marines before studying architecture, appeared to smile while his attorneys hugged him. Yeah, no kidding, because the guy was facing 15 years in prison. I love how they're like, oh, he smiled. Like he's sitting in the corner twirling that mustache like, ooh, I got away with this first one. Oh, I can't wait to roam the subways of Manhattan once again. It's ridiculous. Of course, it's the British. We couldn't be more pleased that a jury of Danny's peers acquitted him of any wrongdoing, his lawyer said. New Yorkers can take some comfort in knowing that we can continue to stand up for one another without sacrificing our rights and freedoms. Like I said, this is very important as a standard or as a foundation for defense, saying, listen, the right to defend oneself and the right to defend one's community has been upheld in places like Wisconsin, New York City, and other places. Now, that doesn't mean like start, going out and dressing up like Batman, wearing hockey pants and trying to like fight crime. But if you are in this position where no other options are available, you can at least try it. Neely's absentee father, which I will make that point because BBC decides not to, who was out of his life while Jordan Neely was homeless, has decided to shout for the verdict, saying no justice, no peace, because Jordan Neely's dad realizes it's time to cash in. Let's see. Neely's death sparked protests across the city. I mean, did it really? Jordan Neely was murdered, said AOC, because AOC's got the intellectual capacity of a PS1. And I'm sorry if I'm insulting the PlayStation 1 system. If you have a better remark about capacity and mental capacity, please drop it in the chat down below and I will use it from now on. But some conservatives defended Mr. Penny's actions. You got to love this stuff, man. Some conservatives, some evil conservatives decided to. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance wrote on X, it was a scandal that Penny was ever prosecuted in the first place, which is true. Last spring, witnesses said that Neely, who suffers from severe mental illness, began shouting at others on the subway, asking for money. I like how asking for money is now the new threaten to take money. It's all perspective. He was asking for money. Yeah, with a knife and telling him he was going to kill you if you didn't give it to him. It's not like he was like, please, sir, do you have $1? It was a little bit more aggressive than that. He was hungry and he wanted to go back to jail. Well, maybe Alvin Bragg should have helped him. One woman on the train said Neely made lunging movements that scared her enough to shield her young child from him. Yeah, because doesn't the public have the right to sit on a subway without having to be harassed? Back and forth. So Daniel Penny's case has been resolved. Now, so that's fantastic. And like I said, you have the Rittenhouse case, you have the Penny case, to establish that self-defense is a credible defense when threatened. Now, it will be interesting to see going forward the civil case. Real quick, I didn't talk about this. I haven't talked about the Penny case before, but it does remind you that you cannot trust anybody in the legal system except your own attorney. And the only reason you can trust your attorney is because you pay him to trust you. What do I mean? When Penny was brought into questioning, he had a detective be like, hey man, I was a Marine too. And he showed him his tats and all that stuff. And Perry, thinking he was in a comfortable situation, pretty much answered the police questions. Please don't ever do that. Shut your mouth until the attorneys show up. Find an attorney, invoke your Fifth Amendment right. It doesn't matter if at the initial point you get an assistant attorney or a court appointed attorney. Shut your mouth and say, Fifth Amendment, I like a lawyer. Don't say anything else. You don't have to help the police. Okay, you're not helping them. All you're doing is help them write a report. And unfortunately, Penny didn't realize that because he trusted the system. Like I think a lot of us want to. So if you're watching the show, it doesn't matter. If you find yourself being questioned by police, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't hurt to say, I'm not talking until I have an attorney present. And the reason that is because if you have been involved in any kind of situation, like Daniel Penny was just involved in a physical altercation, he had adrenaline dumped. His mind was going 1,000 miles per minute. His heart was racing. He was just looking for a friendly face. And, that's when he was like, hey, man, I was a Marine too, Semper Fi. And he's like, oh, friendly face. And we're good. We're okay. Like brothers in arms. You need your attorney to show up and say, my client is not going to say a word for the rest of the day. I will be answering all his questions. You'll see the police treat you a little bit differently in that regard. So that's the biggest thing. And the crazy thing is, there are, and it wouldn't work in New York because those companies don't, but there are companies that will cover you in self-defense incidences. And it may be something that you look into. Yeah, right. Stone Cold taught us that. Don't trust anyone. Yeah. There are self-defense, there are companies, there are attorney representation organizations that will defend you in self-defense incidences, no matter what. So, that's the thing. That's the biggest thing I want to take away from the Daniel Penny incident is make sure you have legal representation when you go through these things, because now he's going to have to face a civil trial. The absentee father smells a settlement. Even if he doesn't get any money, he smells the fact that, hey, this is my time to shine. I can get on interviews. I can get puff pieces written about me. Maybe I can even get a book out of it because, I can write a book, losing my son, the story of Jordan Neely's father or whatever. People will write a book about anything. I know. I wrote a book, Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense, The Armed Catholic, which you can get on Amazon.com. So the fact of the matter is, this guy's going to push it because his 15 minutes are not up. His 15 minutes are, he's in the midst of it. And I'm sure he will at least attempt to file the civil case. Will it go through? That'll be up to a judge. That'll be up to a judge who will say, listen, I don't know what you're looking for, because if Daniel Penny has any decent defense attorney, he's going to say, why is this guy sniffing around? He wasn't here for Jordan Neely's entire life. Why is he so offended that Jordan Neely's dead? Because he didn't take any time. I mean, you got to be a ruthless lawyer. If the choice is keeping Daniel Penny from losing any more money and shredding your opponent, shred your opponent. Your job is not to take into account the feelings of your opponent. There is no justice in a civil trial. There's only victory. That is the only thing you have to be concerned about. And you need a lawyer that's going to do that, who's going to stand there and say, Jordan Neely's dad, who is now sitting here crying in front of you about the death of his son, was absent for most of his life. So I don't know why these tears exist, because they weren't there when Jordan Neely needed him. He wasn't there for Jordan Neely in life. So why is he exploiting him in Jordan Neely's death? And hopefully there's a better attorney than I am who can say that and get this civil trial dismissed. Should be a really easy way to do it. But that's also going to see how much the media really wants to take on this case in the court of public opinion, because we know that can also impact how juries work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And whether Daniel Penny got a good judge in this case, thanks, somehow, and maybe he gets a civil court judge who is not as good, and then he's going to have to go through the entire thing over.